How does the best podcaster in the world make his show and then sell it to Spotify for $100 million last year? In this video, we're going to break down exactly how he did it. There is no doubt that the Joe Rogan Experience is one of the most impressive podcast operations, being downloaded over 200 million times, regularly being at the top of the download charts, and over 1,600 episodes being published. But how does he source guests, record the show in high quality, and promote the show? Let's answer all of these questions in this video. So, giving you a brief introduction to the Joe Rogan Experience, and I've mentioned it before in other videos, but let me tell you a little bit about why I talk about the show so much and why it's such an impressive podcast. It's a 2-hour plus long show where comedian Joe Rogan interviews some unique and interesting guests, such as Elon Musk, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Edward Snowden. He's leveraged the power of recording his podcast with video and posting it to YouTube, which we definitely recommend doing. So who the hell is Joe Rogan and why does he have a podcast? So I must say, I had quite a bit of fun digging into Joe Rogan and figuring out how he ended up with one of the most popular podcasts in the world. Joe was a comedian, UFC commentator, and TV show host in the early noughties and was early to the online video show scene, creating a web show on joerogan.net between 2004 and 2009. He saw the potential of creating content online before it was mainstream, and that gave him a huge advantage. Back in 2009, he started the podcast with some of the worst audio quality I've ever seen. He really did start from scratch here. Over the years, you can see how he's upgraded his equipment, adding better microphones, cameras, and getting some seriously high-profile guests. Is the Joe Rogan Experience the best podcast? No, it's not the best podcast, not at all. Some might argue it's very flawed in some areas, but there is a reason it's one of the most downloaded of all time. We could talk about podcasts with the best tech setup, those with the best storytelling, or the most impressive production value. I'd recommend giving a listen to any of Gimlet's or NPR shows to hear impressive production value and exceptional storytelling. Joe Rogan's guests in recent years have been famous, controversial, and usually extremely interesting. But 1,600 episodes in, how do you keep finding interesting and controversial people? Well, first of all, he has a team to do this for him. Also, his reputation of over 1,600 episodes plus his connection from Hollywood over the past 2 decades has helped him land guests. However, if you want to get high-profile guests on your podcast, it's not as hard as you might think. I've mentioned this on the channel before, but I managed to secure one of the bigwigs in my industry, the HubSpot CEO, Brian Halligan, when my podcast was only just getting started. All it took was a smart outreach email and looking to provide value where I could. If you're comfortable with cold emailing, you'll be familiar with what it takes to send a compelling outreach email. But let me break it down for those that don't. Personalize it and do your research. What can you mention to them that only someone who's done their research would know? Listen to podcasts they've been on before and find some unique information. Make it as easy as possible for them to book time with you. Have a calendar link ready and say the recording will only take an hour or half an hour of their time. Minimize that as much as possible. Respect that they are busy and might not be able to do that at that time or at all. If it's someone who's been on a lot of podcasts before, listen to their episodes and suggest to talk about something completely different. Guests don't always enjoy talking about the same thing over and over again because it can get quite boring for them. Over the years, Joe and his producer Brian Redban have been upgrading the production value to where it now looks and sounds terrific. The new studio since the Spotify acquisition has had mixed reception, but it certainly looks distinctive, you've got to give him that. From the top, let's break down all the kit used for producing the show. The mics are the legendary Shure SM7B on Gator Frameworks boom arms. Joe and his guests use Sennheiser HS280 Pro headphones with a Behringer PowerPlay HA800 headphone amplifier to give his guests control over the headphone volume. They even have these cool little Altinex podcast units to adjust the headphone levels, a USB for charging devices, a HDMI for screen output, and even a cough button which just mutes the mic. They use a Behringer mixer to have more control over the audio, connected to a Universal Audio Apollo interface. For recording video, there are 4 tripod-mounted Canon Vixia HF-G40 camcorders to manage the multiple camera angles. They use the Blackmagic Atom Studio Pro HD switcher, Blackmagic do a pared down A10 Mini that you could use for your own at-home setup. To edit all the show, they use an Apple Mac Pro and Pro Display XDR, naturally. How much do you think all of this cost? Leave a comment below now and I'll tell you at the end of the video. Now, the majority of the Joe Rogan show has been in person at his studio, even throughout the pandemic. However, there have been times where the show has to be recorded completely remotely. The most notable one I remember was with Edward Snowden, and the quality was pretty good. Now, I don't know exactly what the setup they used for this recording. They may have used a traditional double ender, but I do know it's the sort of quality that you can get with Riverside.fm every time. How does he promote his podcast and make it so big? This is one of the best case studies showing how effective video podcasts can be. Joe Rogan absolutely dominates on YouTube, recording each and every episode in high quality. He chops up his 2-hour-long recordings into smaller clips that go viral, and then he distributes them further across social media. This has been one of the secrets to Joe's success, along with consistency in publishing so many episodes over such a long time period. We've seen many popular podcasters follow suit, such as H3H3, Nigger Higger, David Dobrik, Gary Vee, and more. So how did the podcast become so popular? Here are a few lessons on growing a successful podcast that we can get out of Joe Rogan's story. He used YouTube to build an audience. Originally, Joe launched his podcast on YouTube, a great platform to develop an entirely new podcasting audience. YouTube allowed him to expand his listeners to younger people and beyond the podcast apps. Joe cut clips from his long-form conversation and distributed them across different platforms, and many of these have gone viral. And a little tip, when crafting your interview and writing your questions, have a think about distinctive keywords that can lead to really shareable sound bites. Having considerable experience in the entertainment industry, Joe had many connections at his disposal. However, he chose to produce the show with just his editor, Brian Redban, without joining any big networks for support, until of course the Spotify deal came along. The Joe Rogan Experience was really Rogan's passion project. He never tried particularly hard to monetize his podcast or pay a big marketing team for promotion. Instead, Joe has let the show grow organically. The sole goal Rogan was trying to achieve with his podcast was to create long-form, high-quality, engaging content. He didn't waste time announcing the podcast launch and never really asked for reviews. Instead, he invested the time into building quality content to make sure that people liked it and came back for more. Joe Rogan's podcast has become exceptionally popular because of the consistency of the content, the popularity of the guests, and leveraging making a YouTube video podcast. Oh, and this is how much all of the gear costs. Did you guess right? Hopefully this has inspired you for your podcast. Do you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience? Have you listened to it? Leave a comment below with your thoughts on that podcast. We're going to be producing a bunch more videos on this YouTube channel about podcasting, video interviews, and more. So if you want to learn more about starting and growing a podcast, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for watching.